Imagine a man who didn't just play a soldier on a screen. He actually survived the brutality of real war. A man whose rugged voice and cold stare came not from Hollywood training, but from years of fighting for his life in the Pacific during World War II. That man was Lee Marvin. Audiences knew him as the steel-jawed star of Point Blank and The Dirty Dozen, a towering presence who stood shoulder to shoulder with Hollywood's greatest legends. But behind that on-screen harmony hid a truth Lee Marvin never spoke publicly, a truth he left behind in the form of a secret list, a list containing 7 names, 7 actors from the golden age of Hollywood, whom he absolutely despised. Not petty dislike, not simple rivalry, but pure, deep, unshakable hatred. These were men the world admired, yet to Marvin, they were the very people who mocked him, sabotaged him, disrespected his service, and tried to undercut his career every chance they got. Men who pretended to be his friends, men who smiled on camera, and stabbed behind the scenes. Some strutted around with arrogance so thick it poisoned every film set. Some treated crew members like servants. Some rewrote scripts just to glorify themselves. And one man, one of the biggest names in Hollywood history, made the mistake of questioning Marvin's military experience, a moment that left an entire room silent. When Marvin finally revealed his blacklist later in life, Hollywood was stunned. Not because the list existed, everyone knew Marvin never tolerated arrogance, but because of who was on it. Household names, beloved icons, actors the public worshipped, but whose darkest flaws Marvin witnessed firsthand. Today, you're about to hear those stories. And once you learn the truth behind these 7 rivalries, you will never look at these Hollywood legends the same way again. The first name on Lee Marvin's hate list was also the most shocking. John Wayne, the towering American icon, the Hollywood hero, the man millions believed represented courage, patriotism, and frontier masculinity. But to Lee Marvin, John Wayne was none of those things. Their feud began during the filming of the Comancheros in 1961, in a moment so tense that the studio insiders still whisper about it. Wayne was giving an interview, proudly claiming that he always tried to embody the true American fighting spirit in every role he played. Cameras were rolling, reporters were taking notes. Wayne stood tall, confident, and patriotic. Then Lee Marvin walked straight into the spotlight. With a voice sharpened by real battlefields, he looked Wayne dead in the eye and said, "You didn't fight. Don't talk like you did." The entire room froze. Reporters stopped writing. Wayne had no idea how to respond. Because Marvin wasn't bluffing, he had fought in the Pacific under real gunfire, where real soldiers died beside him. Wayne, meanwhile, never served a single day in combat. The embarrassment was so intense that Wayne walked off the interview, humiliated. But that was only the beginning. On set, Wayne tried to teach Marvin how to hold a rifle, as if he were instructing a rookie. Marvin, who had literally been shot and wounded in the war, didn't hold back. He said, loud enough for the crew to hear, "I learned mine at Saipan. Where were you?" Crew members later said Wayne avoided Marvin's eyes for the rest of the day. But the worst moment came in 1965. John Wayne went behind Marvin's back, telling the studio executives that Marvin didn't represent the right American values and should be pushed out of a major Western project. When Marvin heard what Wayne had done, his fury was volcanic. He told colleagues, "He acts like a patriot, but lives like a coward." To Marvin, Wayne's patriotic speeches were more than annoying, they were an insult. a slap in the face to every real soldier who had paid the price Wayne never had to pay. Their hatred ran so deep that when Wayne died in 1979, Marvin was asked if he wanted to send his condolences. His answer was cold. "I honor soldiers." He played one. Lee Marvin's hatred for John Wayne wasn't petty, it was personal, rooted in battle scars that never healed. Scars Wayne could never understand. If there was one Hollywood superstar who represented everything Lee Marvin hated about fame, it was Frank Sinatra. Not because of his voice, not because of his talent, but because of the way he behaved with an arrogance so overpowering that it poisoned every film set he touched. Sinatra wasn't just a celebrity. He was a self-proclaimed king, and he expected everyone around him to act like loyal subjects. On a set, Sinatra was infamous for his temper and unpredictable diva behavior. He arrived late, but still demanded that the entire production stop for him. He barked orders at crew members like they were personal assistants instead of professionals who kept the set running. One day, Marvin witnessed Sinatra strut onto set long after call time, yet acting as if the whole world should be grateful he even showed up. The dismissive gestures, the irritated sighs, the snide comments, it was everything Marvin despised about the Hollywood ego. Marvin approached him and said bluntly, "You think just because you show up, the world owes you everything?" Sinatra, never the type to back down, fired back with a smirk. "At least I don't scream my lines like I'm still in boot camp." That one remark nearly set the room on fire, but their conflict grew even deeper during the production of The Dirty Dozen. Sinatra was supposed to be part of the legendary cast, a role fans today still imagine. Yet he backed out, quietly, abruptly, without explanation. To Marvin, that was pure cowardice. He told the crew, "Sinatra is scared of real men. That's why he wouldn't last a single scene with us." And when Sinatra died years later, Marvin didn't pretend to admire him. He didn't soften his words for the public. He said simply, "Sinatra was the guy who thought the world owed him a round of applause just for walking into a room. That's not the kind of man I respect." Their relationship wasn't a rivalry. It wasn't competition. It was mutual contempt, a collision of two men from two different worlds. Marvin believed in grit, discipline, and authenticity. Sinatra believed the universe revolved around him, and Lee Marvin never respected anyone who believed that. Charles Bronson was a Hollywood tough guy, quiet, rugged, and carved from a stone. But to Lee Marvin, Bronson was something entirely different. A wall, a cold, expressionless wall that refused to connect, refused to collaborate, and refused to be part of the team. Their clash began on the set of The Magnificent Seven, where both men were cast as hardened, stoic gunslingers. But while Marvin brought intensity, fire, and raw emotion, Bronson brought silence, and not the good kind. He barely spoke to the cast. He barely spoke to the crew. He walked onto set like a man trapped inside his own world, uninterested in anyone around him, uninterested in the story they were all trying to tell together. After one particularly tense scene, Marvin shook his head and muttered to a fellow actor, "It's like working with our wall, and the wall has more personality." It wasn't a joke. It was exactly how he felt. Bronson's brooding, icy silence didn't make him mysterious. It made him impossible. To Marvin, acting wasn't just about saying lines. It was about connection, trust, energy. Bronson gave nothing, and that made Marvin feel like he was carrying entire scenes on his own. Crew members often noticed Marvin deliberately avoiding Bronson during breaks, muttering sarcastic comments under his breath about how Bronson didn't care about anything except standing in the frame. In an interview, Marvin once quipped, "Bronson's great in a fight scene, but I'd rather go to war with someone who actually talks to me." To Marvin, this wasn't just about acting styles, it was about respect. A film set was a place where everyone depended on each other. Bronson's cold silence wasn't a stoicism, it was selfishness, a refusal to engage, a refusal to be part of something bigger than himself. And for a man like Lee Marvin, who had survived real battles and valued brotherhood above everything else, Bronson's isolation felt like a slap in the face. Their tension simmered throughout filming, never exploding, but never healing. It became one of the coldest, quietest rivalries in Hollywood. A battle of two tough men, one made of fire and the other made of ice. If there was one man who could ignite Lee Marvin's anger faster than anyone else in Hollywood, it was Robert Mitchum, the actor who treated every film set like a private playground and every job like an inconvenience. Marvin believed in discipline. He believed in showing up prepared. He believed in respecting the craft. Mitchum believed in none of that. From the moment Marvin saw Mitchum stroll onto set, half awake, half drunk, his script barely opened, he felt a fire rising inside him. Mitchum's reputation for doing the bare minimum wasn't a rumor, it was his signature. He floated through scenes like he didn't care, leaning against walls, cigarette hanging from his lips, smirking his way through takes. Their worst clash happened during a late-night shoot in the early 1960s. Mitchum staggered in, smelling of bourbon, missing cue after cue. Marvin watched in disbelief, pacing the floor like a soldier preparing for battle, rehearsing his lines with laser focus. Finally, he snapped. He stepped forward and said, "Are you planning to act tonight or sleep through the whole damn film?" Mitchum didn't flinch. He smirked and replied, "Relax, kid. The camera loves me either way." That line hit Marvin like a punch, not because it was arrogant, but because Mitchum meant it. To Marvin, acting was a responsibility. To Mitchum, it was a casual game. Their rivalry escalated even further at a famous Hollywood party. Marvin confronted him in front of industry elites and fired off one of the most brutal insults of his career. "Your whole career looks like you're sleepwalking." Mitchum didn't hesitate. "At least I don't bark every line like I'm back in boot camp." Gasps filled the room. Whispers spread across Hollywood within days. Their feud became one of the most talked about behind-the-scenes tensions of the era. From that point forward, studios quietly understood one rule: Lee Marvin and Robert Mitchum could never work together again. Their hatred wasn't loud or explosive. It was cold, sharp, and permanent. Two men with two completely different philosophies about life and work, destined to clash from the very first moment they met. Yul Brynner was a Hollywood monarch, not officially, but in his own mind, with his commanding presence, his iconic bald head, and his reputation for control. Brynner treated every film set like a royal court. And to Lee Marvin, that wasn't confidence, it was unbearable arrogance. Their feud erupted on the set of The Magnificent Seven in 1960. Long before cameras ever started rolling, Brynner entered the production like a man convinced the universe revolved around him. He wasn't just performing the role of a king, he became one, dictating decisions, demanding attention, and reshaping the set to match his image. He pushed for script rewrites, not for the story, not for character depth, but for himself adding lines that would make his character appear more powerful, more commanding, more regal. Lee Marvin saw right through it. One day, after yet another attempt by Brynner to inflate his role, Marvin fired at him. "You're not the king of the set, Yul. You're just a guy with a big ego and a bald head." The crew fell silent. Brynner's face froze with a mixture of shock and fury. Because Marvin wasn't joking, he meant every word. But the clash didn't end there. The next battleground became something shockingly trivial: lighting. Brynner, obsessed with his image, demanded that the lighting be positioned perfectly for his face. Every shadow had to be adjusted. Every angle had to flatter him. Entire scenes were delayed just so the spotlight hit him like a king. Finally, Marvin lost his patience. He told him, "You're not acting. You're just waiting for the spotlight to hit you, right?" And again, he wasn't joking. To Marvin, Brynner's perfectionism wasn't dedication. It was vanity, pure, blinding vanity. The tension between them grew so toxic that when future Western projects were proposed, studios didn't even bother pairing them again. Marvin made it clear he would never work with anyone connected to Brynner, ever. Their rivalry wasn't dramatic or explosive. It was a war of personality, king versus warrior, ego versus authenticity. And in Marvin's eyes, Brynner represented everything wrong with Hollywood's obsession with image over substance. And that is the truth behind Lee Marvin's most shocking Hollywood feuds. A list of rivalries so intense, so deeply rooted in pride, betrayal, ego, and raw masculinity that the studios were forced to keep certain actors apart for the rest of their careers. Each name on Marvin's list carried its own darkness. John Wayne, the patriot who never fought; Frank Sinatra, the untouchable diva who demanded worship; Charles Bronson, the stone-cold wall who refused to connect; Robert Mitchum, the sleepwalking legend Marvin couldn't respect; Yul Brynner, the self-crowned king obsessed with his spotlight. These were not minor disagreements. They were collisions between titans. Men who shaped Hollywood's golden age, but who clashed violently behind the scenes with one of the toughest actors ever to step in front of a camera. What makes this list so haunting is the honesty behind it. Lee Marvin never exaggerated. He never needed to. He was a man carved by real battlefields, kept alive by courage and pain. A man who knew the difference between genuine toughness and Hollywood pretenders. And once you hear the stories behind these rivalries, you realize why Marvin carried such unshakable hatred for certain men. Because he valued authenticity in a world obsessed with image, loyalty in a world built on illusions, and honor in an industry where many only played heroes on a screen. Now tell us, which name on Lee Marvin's hate list shocked you the most? Comment below and let us know which rivalry surprised you, angered you, or changed the way you see these Hollywood legends forever. And if you want more untold stories, more hidden truths, and more revelations from the golden age of Hollywood, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps bring these forgotten stories back into the light.